Jack Smith's Deposition, Part 16 Immunity and Public Integrity. Welcome to Law and Society. What I'm doing is breaking down Jack Smith's deposition into chunks so it's easier for us to digest. And the reason why I'm doing it is because Donald Trump and his flock keep on trying to rewrite the history about what happened on January 6, 2021. And the rest of us Americans, it is incumbent upon us as they try to rewrite history to go back to the facts and remind one another and remind everybody that Donald Trump incited an insurrection on January 6, 2021 as a way to distract away from his fake elector conspiracy to defraud the United States and the American people of our voting rights. So that is what happened, and we need to remember that until the end of time. So no matter how much Donald Trump and his lackeys try to peddle the lies about January 6th, we must not let it happen. So I'm going to read out the questions, and then I will add the answers of Jack Smith afterwards. So let's get started. The questioning here is happening from Representative Raskin. Mr. Smith, do you believe that the Supreme Court's decision on executive immunity constitutes an exoneration of the president's conduct in the months and weeks leading up to January 6th and on January 6th? Smith, no. Question, would you just explain that for us? Why you don't see that as an exoneration for what he did? Smith, sure. I understand the Supreme Court's decision. If I can just go back for a second. This was an issue we litigated in the district court. The district court agreed with us. We litigated it in the Court of Appeals. The Court of Appeals agreed with us. We litigated it in the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court majority did not agree with us. They took a view of executive power that was more expansive than we had argued. I disagreed with it for the reasons we set forth in our brief, and the reasons stated by the dissent in the case by Justice Sotomayor. But it was the law of the land, and what my office sought to do in responding to that was to follow the law and see if we still have a case. And I think the evidence that we had after the decision remained powerful. I talked earlier about state officials who put allegiance to the country before party. All those witnesses were still available to us. The heart of our case would still be available to us. And I think it is important to know that he abused his authority in the Justice Department as one way to effectuate this scheme. And this was about him as a candidate trying to say he won an election he didn't win. And so having to frame this in that manner limited some of the evidence. But why we had to supersede and that's why we had to supersede the indictment. But I don't think it was an exoneration because I still believe that there was substantial evidence that would allow us to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. Question, someone can be guilty of a crime in the factual sense, but still be immunized from prosecution, right? Smith, if the court says that's not a crime, then it's not a crime. But in our case, our view was that the ruling excised a certain portion of our proof, but all the charges we brought, we felt were valid. How would you think about classifying the crimes that you investigated and were prepared to prosecute related to January 6th and the attempt to overthrow a presidential election? Smith, you follow the facts and the law. Nobody is above the law. You treat everybody the same. My personal view is that the difference is the harm. The Court of Appeals in this case, when we litigated it, said that if things we allege were proven, it would amount to an attack on the structure of our democracy. Those were the court's words. Question, if individuals are fired or does their job simply for taking part in an investigation into someone who is an authority figure or in a high position in government, does that impact our democracy? Smith, if you take the position that you cannot work in the federal government unless you have a political allegiance to the president, I think there are many harms to that. Our country tried that in the past. It's called the patronage system. And what we learned in our history is that those systems are rife with not only corruption, but with incompetence, because the people who have these jobs, they didn't get them because of merit, because they dedicated their career to learning national security law, to learning how properly to investigate a case. They got their jobs because they are loyal to a particular person. That's not fair, but it also makes for people who really don't know how to do the work. So I think there's a danger to the country. It saddens and angers me in the short term, but I think there's are great costs to our long term if that's the direction we're going. There are people who have decided that they don't want to make a lot of money. They're not looking for fame. These are career prosecutors. They just want to do good work. And I think when you lose that culture, you lose a lot. Question. I want to talk a little bit about the public integrity section. What is their mission? Smith. The public integrity section was formed after Watergate, and the section litigates complex corruption cases around the country. It does some of those cases on its own. It does, or at least during my time there, it also does cases in conjunction with the U.S. Attorney's Office. It is also sort of clearinghouse for expertise on these issues like the speech or debate clause. Does the public integrity section play a role in checking potential abuses by DOJ as it relates to investigating members of Congress? That's the question. Smith answers, well, in particular, I think it's valuable for prosecutors to make sure they get things right. They are sort of keepers of these issues, and they are the people you go to make sure you're doing things the right way. Question. Isn't public integrity also kind of a gatekeeper for even beginning any kind of prosecution or investigation of public figures or congressional members? Like, don't the department regulations require public integrity be consulted or provide approval before certain steps can be taken or, litigation can commence? Smith, that's correct. There are several enumerated investigative steps or procedures that public integrity oversees. It is not much for public figures, but more for, again, members of Congress, people who are in governmental positions where the investigations are sensitive, and it's important that we get it right and we work on the same standards. Everyone works off the same standards. Question. And what happens when public integrity is dismantled and that protection is removed? Smith. Well, it always existed during my career in the department, and I fear without it, there will be, as I said, an inability to prosecute public corruption, and also a lack of expertise that when you do it, to do it the right way. So that is section 16 of Jack Smith's deposition, talking about the immunity case and about the importance of public integrity section of the DOJ and how Jack Smith complied with the section's requirements. Thank you for listening. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll come back and talk to you more about Jack Smith's deposition very soon. Take care, everybody.